Hi guys, and welcome to this info presentation on the Freedom Challenge. This presentation is primarily aimed at people who have not yet done a Freedom Challenge event before and are keen to find out more. Okay, so just to outline what we're going to be discussing here, first we'll just explain what the Freedom Trail actually is and how it came to be. We're going to run through the different Freedom Challenge events that are on offer. We're going to talk a bit about why riding a Freedom Challenge event is not like any mountain bike event you may have done in the past. Go through a bit about how the logistics actually work. We get a lot of questions about how it works out there when you're actually riding on the Freedom Trail, so just to explain that in a bit more detail. And then just give you guys some useful tips and information if you are thinking about taking part in one of the events, on how is a good way to start going about preparing yourself. And lastly, we'll just chat about the charity that is attached to the Freedom Challenge. Okay, so the Freedom Trail is essentially a trail that links, that's been established in 2003. It links Pietermaritzburg all the way down to Wellington in the Cape. And what the trail is just basically a combination of gravel tracks and sometimes single track paths, sometimes district roads, sometimes old forgotten historic wagon trail passes, and they're all sort of linked together to make this 2,150 kilometer trail that we know as the Freedom Trail. There are 37 established, we call them support stations along the way. These are basically guest houses or B&Bs or farm stays that we have set up to support riders along the trail. So you can come and ride along the Freedom Trail, any portion of it or the whole thing, any time of the year, doing it as your own tour with your own backup and making your own way down the route. You just need to please use the accommodation that has been set up, those 37 support stations if you're doing a tour. The tours, there's not really strict rules about doing tours. You can use GPSs and they have support vehicles and all those sorts of more comfortable amenities. But if you choose to do an event, there are a strict set of rules which you need to adhere to. Okay, so the events are basically races that take place on the Freedom Trail. So we're just going to run through quickly what those events currently are. So the flagship event is the Freedom Challenge race across South Africa. This happens every year in the middle of winter, and it is a race across the entire length of the Freedom Trail. So it's 2,150 kilometers with about 33,000 meters of altitude gain in the entire route. It is exceptionally challenging, and it takes the average competitor about 19 days to complete. The record is around 10 days, and the cutoff for the race across South Africa is 26 days. Then the entire route is also broken up into 4 sections. We'll call them quarters. They're not exactly quarters, but they're close enough. So the first one of these is the race to Rhodes, and that is the section from Pietermaritzburg to Rhodes, 480 kilometers, almost 11,000 meters of altitude gain. And we will run through later in the presentation a bit about how the different quarters differ. So the next quarter is from Rhodes to Cradock, and that is almost 600 kilometers, and the terrain changes quite dramatically. And then the next portion is from Cradock to Willimore. That's called the race to Willimore. And lastly, we have the longest of the 4 quarters is the race to Paarl, which is about 610 kilometers, going from Willimore all the way to Wellington. Okay, so if you are thinking about maybe taking part in a Freedom Challenge event, most people will start with one of these shorter events. I mean, by all means, feel free to dive straight into the big guy and do the race across South Africa first up, but it's a good idea as an introduction to see if this sort of event is for you, to maybe take on one of the shorter races. So I'm just going to run through quickly, what you can expect, how from each of these 4 shorter races. And, obviously if you are doing the full one, you get to experience this all. But in the first one, the race to Rhodes, very mountainous, challenging terrain. You'll be riding along a lot of goat tracks and footpaths, and you're riding through the Sisonke Maluti Mountains between Pietermaritzburg and almost go right past the border of Lesotho near Tiffendale Ski Resort. So, very much in the Drakensberg, very challenging. You're following basically the route that the Trappist monks took as they went on their voyage inland. So there's a lot of history, a lot of mission stations along the way, and the accommodation on the Race to Rhodes is mainly in community-run guest houses, and there's a lot of people around. You're riding through the Ciska Transkei area, and you're riding through a lot of tribal land. So even though it is in the mountains and it's isolated, you're going to see shepherds along the way and people herding cattle and ride through the occasional village. And it's all part of the experience, and it is by far the most African, it has the most African feel of the 4 quarters of the route. And there are also a few mountains that must be climbed, not necessarily ridden. So there are some portaging sections which make it all that much more adventurous. Okay, so then and just timing in the year, the Race to Rhodes happens with the race across South Africa. Both the Race to Rhodes and the Race to Paarl happen with the race across South Africa in the middle of the year, and then the Race to Cradock and the Race to Willemore, which are the middle 2 sections of the entire route, happen. Their standalone events happen in the second half of March. So the Race to Cradock is from Rhodes to Cradock, and now you kind of over the Drakensberg Mountains and into the Stormberg region. This is a part of the country which I'm sure lots of people have hardly spent any time in. It is just wide open spaces, massive grasslands, farming area in the Eastern Cape. The accommodation in this portion changes more to sort of farm stay accommodation. You're going to experience a lot of delicious food and very hospitable farmers' wives who look after you. And it's a great event to do if you just want to get out into the middle of nowhere and just have a massive amount of space around you. It does still have a couple smaller portage sections, but it is a really good event to do as your first one up. It also has quite a lot of history as it goes through lots of the Boer War areas and battle sites, and you'll go past the Stormberg blockhouse, as you can see in the bottom right picture, and the site where the Smuts ambush took place. So it's also a route that is so rich in culture, as well as natural beauty and biodiversity. So then, following that event, towards the end of March is the Race to Willemore, and this now goes from Cradock to Willemore, similar distance, sort of 550 odd kilometers. And towards the end of the Race to Cradock, you actually drop off the Stormberg and into the Karoo to arrive at Cradock. And then leaving Cradock, you're still in this great Karoo, and these are massive wide open spaces. And you'll be making your way down towards the Baviaanskloof. Many people will know the Baviaanskloof from having done maybe the Trans-Baviaans or just having visited in the past. It is a truly magnificent part of our beautiful country. The route we use to get into the Baviaanskloof is a little bit different. It's an old disused 4x4 track that goes through a valley called the Osseberg. And this has been sort of infamously renamed Mordor by lots of the riders because it's very wild and can be quite scary in the dark, I think. But basically you follow this river downstream as you make your way towards the eastern side of the Baviaanskloof to go into the reserve. On this portion of the route there's also some incredible Karoo hospitality. People are just so friendly. It's a really great portion to do with a group of friends as well. And another magic one to do as your first experience on the Freedom Trail. And then lastly, we have the race to Paarl. We usually recommend people do this one last if they are keen on doing the shorter ones, but obviously it can be done first up. But it has some serious challenges, and it is the longest of the four. Being the longest, it still probably has the most district road and gravel road in it out of the four shorter races. But now you're heading from the Karoo, you'll be going from Prince Albert up the Swartberg Pass and dropping down into Die Hel, which if you've ever visited that part of the country, you'll know is just one of the most beautiful, magical places on earth. And once in Die Hel, you don't come back out the way you came, like everyone else and everyone in the car. You actually exit Die Hel via an old donkey trading route that hasn't been used in probably 100 years, but the path still exists as a hiking trail, and the Freedom Challenge riders hike with their bikes up the old De Leer hiking trail and out the other side, and then through the Enaceberg Nature Reserve, down through Montague, McGregor, and finally finishing with a major sting in the tail, a huge portage on the very last day that goes from the Steynskloof Dam all the way up and over Elandspad to drop down to the base of the Toyskloof Pass. And this is just it's almost like a final test for the people doing the full race across South Africa on their final day, and it's a massive day. Probably expect to hike your bike for about 6 or 7 hours up this valley of endless proteas, but truly magical place too. The weather on this portion can be a bit nasty, obviously having winter rainfall in the Cape, but then again also the accommodation in this part, you start to realize that you're getting closer to the Cape, and the accommodation is probably some of the nicest spots along the whole Freedom Trail. Okay, so that's basically just a quick summary on the differences between the four events. And then not to forget about our new event, which we launched in 2021. If you do have a massive aversion to trying to learn about how to navigate by map and compass, we have now launched a GPS navigation race. It has two distance options, a 400 and a 700 kilometer route, the Freedom Circuit it is called. It is a circular route, so you start and finish at Bushman's Neck in the Drakensberg near Underberg, and it uses a lot of the existing Freedom Trail, but being a circular route, it can't, not the entire thing is on the Freedom Trail, but it really gives you that authentic Freedom Trail feeling without the getting lost part, because you are able to use a GPS, and that's how you navigate your way. There are fairly challenging cutoffs, particularly in the 700 kilometer route, so nighttime riding is going to be required if you want to make the finish in cutoff time, and it's up to you when you stop and how much rest you have and how fast you ride. And it's not like your other typical gravel rides or ultra endurance rides in South Africa and around the world, because it is still very challenging terrain. It's a mountain bike race. Some people have done it on a gravel bike, but we'd highly recommend still mountain bike. And it, you'll be getting off, you'll be pushing, you'll be carrying for short periods of time. Not a lot of portaging on this one, but there are unrideable sections or short little bits that where you'll need to get off your bike. But an awesome adventure, and something that we hope will grow in years to come. Okay, but going back to the normal Freedom Challenge events, just to run through a little bit about why these events are different to maybe anything else you've done in the past. And once doing this, I think you will agree with me that it's a special experience and something you may not have experienced before. So firstly, the navigation. I think I have mentioned this already, but the route is not marked, and you need to navigate your way by using a map. The route is pre-marked on the map. You just have to follow it. But this obviously poses serious challenges for some people, and makes it that much more adventurous. Yeah, I mean, you can expect to get lost, you can be confused at times, but finding your way using a map and compass just adds so much to the adventure and the sense of accomplishment that you get making your way through this incredible journey. The route is essentially non-stop. I mean, there's the 37 stops we spoke about where you can choose to stop and how long you stop for, but your clock never stops. So, you are probably going to be doing a little bit of night riding at some point. Usually people start in the dark in the morning, but when you leave these stops and when you choose to ride and choose to stop is essentially completely up to you. So once you've left Maritzburg, your clock starts, and when you get to the finish line, that's when it stops. So this route is quite different to other bikepacking races you may have done around the world because, even though it's not, it is a semi-supported race, you arrive at these support stations that are actually expecting you, and they know that you're going to be tired, and they know that you're going to be hungry. And the comments we get over and over, year in, year out, are just how amazing these people actually are. They welcome you into their homes, no matter how muddy and tired and grumpy you are, or into their guest houses, and they just look after the riders so amazingly. And it is something that always stands out for the riders. It's just how well they've been taken care of, and such a special part of this ride. And it really is what makes the Freedom Trail. The Freedom Trail is the people along the route and the way they treat the riders. It is just really great. On the Freedom Trail, you're going to go to some incredible places, some places that you think maybe your bike shouldn't be going to, or maybe you would never otherwise go to. But it's just one of the most magical ways to see this country, this beautiful country of ours, and the bits in between the places you might have otherwise seen from a car or an adventure bike or anything like that. The route takes you up and over mountain ranges, between valleys, between all the other places that you might have otherwise thought you would get to someday, and just seeing the country from one side to the other from your bicycle saddle is just very special. It is a soulful journey. It is a journey across South Africa and through South Africa, and you get to experience so many different aspects of it. The terrain changes, the people change, the surroundings change, the geology changes so much. I mean, the entire route goes through, I think, 6 of the 8 natural biomes that South Africa that exist in South Africa. So it's just incredible that you ride your bike from one side to the other through so many different landscapes and different places with different experiences, and you'll find yourself at the end just sort of hard to contemplate everything you've journeyed along on your bicycle. Then the camaraderie that develops along the trail, different people putting themselves through a lot of extreme endurance and challenging themselves and coming out together. It creates bonds and friendships that last a lifetime. And this is something we see quite a lot of on the Freedom Trail. Guys aren't out there to show off their egos or for any other reason other than for a real pilgrimage for themselves and to experience this beautiful country. And it really does nurture some great friendships. Okay, so just to run through a bit of the logistics of how things actually work. When you're out on the trail, it's quite confusing or difficult to understand if you've never actually spoken to someone or really got into depth of how the actual logistics and day-to-day works on the trail. So I've mentioned that over the 2,150 kilometers, there's about 37 support station stops. It actually goes support station, and then in between all the support stations are interim stops. But all these stops are about 50 to 60 kilometers apart. So you're basically riding from stop to stop and choosing where you would like to actually sleep. You pre-pack about 20 ice cream tubs, 2-liter ice cream tubs before you start the race. And you send those to the race office, who then distribute them to all the support stations. So you've got 20 support stations, 17 interim stops. And We will distribute your 2-liter ice cream tubs, which have been carefully packed with your maps and your trail food that you might want, and whatever you might need down the way that you can resupply with along the way. So when you get to these support stations, there's food available, and it's plentiful food. So what goes into the ice cream tubs is more trail snacks and things you're going to want out on the bike. The meals that you get at the support stations are great. There's accommodation, towels and bedding are provided, but basically you need to carry everything else you need with you. All your clothes and personal belongings needs to be carried on your bike or on your back, you need to be self-sufficient other than these support stations. There's usually electricity, or there is electricity, barring a bit of load shedding and power failures and that sort of thing along the way. So you can charge devices at these support stations, and at most of them they'll offer to do your laundry at a small fee, so you can wash clothes or have your clothes washed along the way. Okay, so when you're on the trail riding in one of these events, you can expect to be out there for at least 10 to 12 hours a day, and that's just wanting to ride sort of day by day, not pushing it too hard. For lots of people, riding 12 hours a day is pushing it very hard. But if you want to be racing this thing, you need to be riding sort of 16 to 18 hours a day. So by comparison, 10 to 12 hours a day is an average kind of day that you can expect to be out on the bike. And I say on the bike, but a lot of the time you're pushing, you're climbing over fences, you're crossing rivers. So, it's on the bike, but it's basically just out there. And when you break it down to an average speed of 10 kilometers an hour or something, it seems incredibly slow. But the terrain is challenging, the navigation is challenging, and it all makes for just quite slow moving sort of average speed. And that's why the days are so long. You can expect to get lost. There's almost no doubt about it. You'll probably get lost more than once. You'll lose your sense of humor. There's no doubt about that either. You'll probably lose your sense of humor quite a few times. This is a challenging event, and we don't want to make it seem like it's an event for everyone, because it's not. It takes a certain type of person to put themselves through this, to take on such an extreme challenge. And we need to actually warn you that it is a very difficult ride, and something that is definitely for the more experienced adventurer or mountain biker out there. So, you will make plans along the way. There will be snow, there will be rain, there will be sunshine, there will be wind, there will be a myriad of obstacles along the way, and your plans will change. You need to expect that and adapt as you go. This race will test you. There's no doubt about it. It will test it will test you and what your perceived limits are. But in the end, almost everyone that arrives at the end has a similar thing to say, and that is that this journey changed them in one way or another. It changed what they thought they were physically capable of, mentally capable of, and for many it changes your entire perception on life. So it is truly a South African pilgrimage. What do you need? I'm not going to go into great detail at this stage about what you need and what you don't need, and all. Once you decide to do it, you start doing your homework and working out exactly what equipment you're going to be taking. But the basics are: you need a mountain bike, you need a waterproof jacket, a headlamp, a backpack, and a lot more clothes. Well, not a lot, as many more clothes as you feel necessary. But don't let the gear side of things stop you from taking part in this. I put up a picture here of Dino Marosic, who in 2012 rode the entire Rasa on a Peugeot Alaskan Wolf that cost, I think, 300 or 400 rand from Pick and Pay. 26-inch wheels, tubes in his tires. It's just a great example of what can be done. You don't have to have the latest and greatest of everything. Obviously, if you have the money, buying cool gear and having all the best of everything can help. It can make life easier or better, but it is definitely not necessary. This race is more about how prepared you are in your head, and how prepared how you adapt and take everything day by day rather than having the latest and greatest of everything. So a few more useful tips just before wrapping up. We really advise, if you are thinking about doing it, to try and get hold of people. I mean, lots of people know someone who has done the Freedom Challenge or one of the shorter events. Chat to people, find out, the nitty-gritties and how things went for them, and take their advice. That's almost getting that first-hand feedback is almost the best way to find out more. Learn how to read a topographic map. I'm always amazed by how many people arrive on the start line with never having looked at a map before. It is such an integral part of this race, and if you just know your basics, it makes life so much easier. We will be putting up a tutorial on the website about doing basic Freedom Challenge map reading that as a minimum we would recommend you watch. Train with a backpack on. In the race, most people ride with backpacks because of the large amount of carrying your bike. It's not really worth overloading your bike with baggage. So train with a backpack on, get used to it. The extra weight on your shoulders can be difficult to adjust to if you're doing it for the first time in the race. Train for the hiker bike sections. Also, again, your upper body strength comes into play when you're carrying your bike up a mountain for a couple hours at a time. So doing some work and preparing yourself for those portage sections can really help. Try and connect with others that are also planning on doing the ride that you're doing. If there's some people in the same city that you live in, or in your riding groups, try and connect up or better still, find a friend who's keen to do the race with you and go through the whole process together of preparing yourselves and getting yourselves there and even riding together. It's a great thing to do, adventure to take on with a friend or family member, or, something like that. Start off slow, both in your training and in the race. Look after your body. This is a long race, and most of the people who pull out they're putting their bodies through. Their bodies go through a bit of shock in the first few days, or after having not done day after day of 12-hour riding and walking. And our advice is just take things easy, work your way into a steady pace, and build as you go. And last but not least, do your homework. There is quite a lot of prep and things that you need to learn and get your head around in order to do these races. It's not a race that you can just arrive without giving it any pre-thought and everything is going to go perfectly. There's a lot of homework, there's a lot of decisions you need to make about how you're going to go about doing it. So our advice is just do your homework and spend some time on your preparation. Okay, that pretty much wraps up our presentation. If you are doing this ride and taking on a challenge like this, often it's great to do it for a different cause. And so I just wanted to chat briefly about the charity that is attached to the Freedom Challenge. And we have what's called the Freedom Challenge Scholarship Fund. And this is a charity that's very close to our hearts. And if riders are wanting to ride for a charity, but they're not quite sure about who they want to ride for or who they would like to support, then we really encourage you to think about supporting the Freedom Challenge Scholarship Fund. There is a school along the way, very close to the fourth overnight stop near Matatiele, called Mariazell Mission School. And basically, the Freedom Challenge Scholarship Fund is a fund that has been set up by the riders in order to give back to the trail. And the way it works is there's some other rural schools along the trail that are all in the program, and they put forward kids' names who are showing promise in their school and could do with a little bit of a helping hand. And those kids are taken into, first interviewed and go through a process, but the successful students are taken into a scholarship program where we actually take them, they're taken out of their rural schools and put into the Mariazell Mission High School, which is a private school in the area, and offers them a far superior education to what they might be getting in their normal rural school, and just gives them a real chance at a university exemption and can give them that head start they may need in life. So we try and take in about 8 to 10 new students every year. So there's probably 40 to 50 students in the program at any given time. And it only costs about 13,000 Rand per child per year. And this includes their education, their school uniforms, their textbooks, even some of their transport to get to and from the school. And that's the only place the money is going to. There is absolutely no administrative costs associated to this charity. So every cent that is donated goes directly to the children that need it. And I'm sure you'll all agree that probably the best way to make a difference in this country of ours is through education. The more people become educated, the more opportunities are created, the more we will all grow as a country. And in these rural areas, I promise it can make such a massive difference. So if you want to find out a bit more about that, the website is thefreedomtrailfoundation.org. Go check it out. And if you are keen to ride for a greater cause or to give back to the trail in any way or back to this beautiful country, then please consider the Freedom Challenge Scholarship Fund. Okay. So basically, feel free to drop any questions below. I'll try and answer whatever we can. If you are watching this presentation live, then there should be a Q&A section afterwards. But contact us on email, drop comments below this video, and we will answer whatever questions we can. Thanks for watching, guys, and hope to see you out on the trail sometime soon.